All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Katie Monahan, and I'm a communications strategist here at the Ohio Arts Council, and I coordinate the OAC's monthly webinar series. I am a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair. I'm wearing a light blue sweater, and behind me is a cream-colored wall with framed artwork and a black bookshelf. On the screen here is a slide welcoming everyone to today's webinar, How to Prepare a Standout ADAP Application. The slide features an image of a set of hands typing on a laptop. So we are super excited to partner with our friends at Art Possible Ohio on this presentation about the Artists with Disabilities Access Program. But before we dive in and introduce today's presenters, there are, of course, just a few housekeeping items that I need to go over. So, first, everyone tuning in today is in listen-only mode, but that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions. If you have a question at any point during the webinar, go ahead and enter it into the Q&A box there in your control panel. I will be monitoring those along with our friend here, Kathy Signorino, who's behind the scenes with me from our Artist Programs office here at the OAC. We'll monitor those throughout, and we'll be sure to leave plenty of time at the end to get to everyone's questions. And again, just be sure to use the Q&A box there. It's a little easier to track the questions through that than the chat. Next, live captioning is available for today's webinar, and you can access those captions by clicking on the closed captioning icon in your control panel. And if you have audio issues or trouble connecting, we recommend refreshing your browser. And if that doesn't work, try logging off and logging back in. And please keep in mind that because we are presenting from different locations, there may be some variations in bandwidth or internet stability. So if somebody freezes up or the sound fluctuates for a minute, thank you in advance for bearing with us. I promise we will keep on rolling through any of those little technical difficulties. And finally, we are recording today's webinar, and that captioned recording will be available on our webinars page at oac.ohio.gov/webinars and our YouTube channel by early next week. And for those of you who are attending today and who registered for the webinar, you'll also receive a follow-up email containing that link to the recording and the slide deck. All right, so that is it for housekeeping. Now I'm excited to welcome today's presenters, my colleague, Chaz O'Neill of the Ohio Arts Council's Artist Programs Office, and Megan Feitz of Art Possible Ohio. And we're also going to hear from special guests, our successful ADAP applicants, artists Sarah Bullington and Steve Lansky. So that's it from my part. We're super grateful to have you all here today to talk about this program. I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Chaz. Chaz, take it from here.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We're super excited to talk to you about the ADAP program and talk with Arts Possible Ohio and have our guests speak a little bit about their process and their grant applications that they submitted. Again, my name is Chaz O'Neill, and I am the individual artist and Percent for Art program coordinator here at the Ohio Arts Council. I'm a white male, and I have dark brown hair with a beard and goatee. Today, I'm wearing a maroon collared shirt, and I'm in my cubicle office at the Ohio Arts Council, and there's a little bit of artwork behind me. Again, we are joined by Megan Feitz from Arts Possible Ohio. Megan, do you want to introduce yourself just real quick before we get started?
Hi, yeah, thank you, Chaz. I'm Megan Feitz. I'm a white woman with pink glasses. I'm wearing a plaid red dress, and I have short curly brown hair. Behind me, there's a bookshelf with some artwork, and then a big Passionworks flower, bright colorful flower, directly behind my right shoulder. We are the statewide service agency on arts and disability, and we support the ADAP grant through technical assistance and support.
Great, thank you. So I have the pleasure to talk to you all about the exciting things and in the fine print in the program overview, the changes to the guidelines that are in the ADAP program and the review criteria. We then will present a link to a already how-to guide for the how to apply portion of the presentation later. Then I will hand it off to Megan and Art Possible Ohio for their workshop presentation. Then I will return to talk about how we can be of service during the application process. So that is today's agenda, and on the screen, I'm showing a lovely image of Sarah Bullington's work. It's a close-up of a natural beaded necklace The beads used are driftwood, natural seeds, and ostrich eggshells. So it's a very nice image there to start us off. So let's talk about the program overview. On the screen, we're kind of showing it a top image of FY22 ADAP grantee Lisa Marita Pates. She hosts a workshop during her Anamorphous exhibition at the Springfield Museum of Art. And there's 4 people sitting at a table, and the artist herself, Lisa, standing at the end with a gray shirt, short brown hair, and glasses. And she's kind of giving directions to the people at the table. So that's the program. We're going to get to know the program a little bit. The Artists with Disabilities Access Program, or the ADAP program as we call it, provides funding that gives individual artists with disabilities the resources they need to further their artistic development. Grants are awarded to individual artists at both the emerging artist level of $500 and to the professional artists up to $2,500. For the purposes of this program, an emerging artist is an individual who has consistently shown their chosen art form for more than 3 years and have demonstrated strong artistic potential and to want to develop their artistic careers. A professional artist is an individual who devotes a major portion of their time to creating, practicing, performing, or teaching their chosen art form and receives some type of monetary support for their endeavor. The grant deadline for this grant is May 1st for projects that will take place July 1st of this year through June 30th of the following year. If program funds are not exhausted, there will be a second deadline for November 1st of this year for projects that will take place January 1st of next year through June 30th of next year. Applicants may not receive both an Artists with Disabilities Access Program grant and an Artist Opportunities grant in the same fiscal year. Applicants must be a resident of Ohio and not a student at the time of application in a degree-seeking program. Applicants must be a resident of Ohio and must remain a resident during the grant period. They have exhibited, performed, or published work as an artist within the last 3 years. They must be at least 18 years of age and have a disability per the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. Students attending high school, or again, students pursuing a undergraduate or a graduate degree or a PhD at the time of application may not apply. Let's talk about some the changes we made from last year to this year to the grant program. You may have noticed just a little bit ago that we actually increased the grant amount for the professional artists for up to $2,500. So it used to be $1,000, now it's up to $2,500. We actually removed the letters of support from the requirements required for the support materials, so we removed that. The ARTI system underwent some upgrades as well, and you'll see that in the video that we will provide a little later. And the ADAP for organizations actually has moved to the organization side of our agency, and that is in the Arts Rise grant program. Let's talk a little bit about how the program works. You know, we want applicants to introduce their work to new audiences to raise their artistic profile through exhibition, performances, or screenings. We want applicants to develop new skills through participation in activities such as conferences, artist residencies, workshops, fellowships, masterclasses, or apprenticeships. Applicants should want to advance their career through activities like production of marketing materials, website development, equipment purchases, but not to exceed $1,500 out of the budget, purchase materials or services or rental fees for equipment and or facilities. We're going to talk a little bit about the guidelines next. And on the image on the screen, we are showing a computer desk with a little bit of light coming in with a stylus and a tablet, a coffee cup, and some headphones. So we're going to talk about the guidelines and how to find them. On the screen, we are showing the image of the Ohio Arts Council homepage. It's a little cut off here, but the grants tab is highlighted. at the top, and we are showing a purple arrow that's pointing to the grants info and guidelines. It should be pointing to the grants info and guidelines. You can find our website, which is oac.ohio.gov, and go under the grants tab and select grants info and guidelines. On the next image, we are showing what the OAC website looks like, listing all of the individual artist grant programs that you'll find on that grants info and guidelines page. We have an arrow pointing towards the ADAP PDF link. So once you're on the grants page, you will scroll down to individual artists, and you'll scroll down again to find the Artists with Disabilities Access Program, and then you can download the PDF. So once you have that PDF in front of you, we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of projects are eligible for support. Again, for projects that are taking place through July 1st of the current year through June 30th of the following year. Then on the screen, we are showing a person from the backside with shoulder length black hair. This person is reaching up and painting a large mural of floral patterns on a brick wall. So project examples we're going to let you know about. Here are some examples that you request funds for. Exhibition support to cover the costs of framing, shipping, space rental, and promotional materials for an exhibition. You can hire an editor for your publication, or an illustrator for your children's book, a producer for your music album, or a stage manager for your theatrical play. You can pay to have a website built, or you can hire a professional photographer to document your artwork. Maybe you want to take a class or participate in a residency or workshop series to enhance your skills. Or you need funds to put on a performance or to stage a play of your work. These are all great examples of project support. Let's talk next about the review criteria that you're going to find in the guidelines. The header image here, we're showing an original artwork by FY22 ADAP grantee Stephen Lansky, who's here with us today. This image is titled Bryant Avenue, and it's a black and white line drawing of a row of houses and trees. We encourage you to read the review criteria and the guidelines to make sure you hit on as many of these as possible when you write your narrative and upload your support materials into the ARTI system. These criteria correspond to the questions listed in ARTI, and it's how the panel will score your application. So let's review those. So for a total of 60 points, the program quality is the first one. This is worth 15 points. Panelists will want to see evident skill in an artist's chosen discipline and a commitment to advancing the artist's art form that is demonstrated. And they're going to see this evident in your resume, in your bio, in your support materials, or in your audio-visual samples, or your writing samples for that matter. Community engagement is next, and that's worth 10 points. The project will increase the applicant's ability to share their work in the community. And panelists will want to see that you have a community engagement aspect to your project. These could be a performance. You could hold a community workshop, a public exhibition, a poetry reading, a book signing, or a concert. They could also be past examples of things you've already done. Maybe you show your work on your website, your Instagram, or onto a blog or anything like that. That is also perfectly acceptable for community engagement materials and evidence. Resource management is worth, defining and measuring success. Next one, 25 points. Applicant has established a quality plan and clear goals for the project. Outcomes develop the artistic career of the artist. Applicant's proposed project demonstrates artistic, educational, or cultural value. This is where you'll want to talk also about your timeline and state your goals for the grant period. We often hear panelists who review the applications say, I just wish they showed us a more detailed timeline. And this is where you'll tease out all those details about your project. You could break it down into months, weeks, or a couple months that you want to either start with your project end date and kind of work backwards and really tell the panelists, fill the panelists in on how you're going to achieve your goals and how you're going to achieve those benchmarks in your project. And finally, there's resource management, and that's 10 points. This is about the project budget, and is it complete and it supports the goals for the activity. The applicant demonstrates a capacity to complete the proposed project. As you'll see in the video, we added a budget module to the application, and you'll be required to complete the budget by entering amounts for totals for each expense. You'll also want to write a detailed description of each of those line items in your budget. So also, here's an expert tip. To show good grantsmanship, you should include estimates and or resumes of the professionals you want to hire for your services, and those also can be uploaded in your support materials. So let's talk about those support materials next. So the following support materials are required for an emerging artist. So that is a artist resume or a biography, and then your work samples. Those may include up to 12 images or at least 2 audio, video, or writing samples, not more than 3 years old. The following materials are required for a professional artist, and that is a resume and a biography or artist statement. So the only difference between the two is the artist resume or biography for emerging, and for the professional, we need both those items. And then again, for the work samples, this may include 12 images, up to 2 audio, video, or writing samples, not more than 3 years old. All right, so again, back to that, sorry, let's go back. Again, these will be a big part of those 15 points in your program quality section of the review criteria. So we do stress high quality documentation of your work and professional resumes to show to the panel. All right, so on the screen, we're going to talk about how to apply an ARTI, but on the screen, we are showing an image of a person's hands who is working at a laptop. However, we want to keep this webinar focused on the narrative and review criteria information. So we want to turn this presentation over to our friends at Art Possible. So what we're going to do is we are going to provide a link on how to apply an ARTI. It's going to be a video that Katie's going to drop in the chat. So yours truly, I will be on this video, will walk you through step by step on how to open and create an application. I will also talk about walk you through all those steps, where to find things in the ARTI system, what to upload, and all those little fine details. Then I will also talk about what happens after you submit your application. So we encourage you to watch that video when it's convenient for you. That web address is on the screen. It's a rebrand.ly/ADAP-ARTI. And Katie, like I said, is going to share that video link in the chat. And it's also going to be available in the follow-up email that's going to come up after this, the conclusion of this webinar. So I think I now will turn the presentation over to Megan to talk about the support Art Possible Ohio offers. And then we'll hear from 2 successful applicants, Sarah and Steven. So take it away, Megan.
Thank you so much, Chaz. I really appreciate all of that. Just as a reminder, I'm Megan from Art Possible Ohio, the statewide service organization on arts and disability, and we provide technical support for the ADAP grant. Worked with lots of artists over the years. And today I have invited Steve Lansky and Sarah Bullington, 2 recently awarded grantees, to participate in this workshop with you all today, because Sarah and Steve had really excellent answers that they provided in the narrative section, though they were very different in scope, how they write, their projects were very different. And we thought these 2 really wonderful examples would be super helpful for you when you're considering how to kind of answer those questions. Both responded to the narrative questions very differently, but very effectively. And I think overall, sometimes we find those narrative questions a little bit perhaps intimidating, or we're not quite sure what they're getting at. And really what we're doing is we're just overthinking them when what they really need is quite direct answers. So we're going to share direct answers with you today. I'm going to either read those answers to you, or I'm going to synthesize the answers to you. And then I'm going to let Sarah and Steve talk about their thought processes or add any comments they want to add to each of those sections. So moving right along, the first thing I wanted to do was just share with you what the grant projects were for each applicant. So first we have Steve Lansky's ADAP grant application. The project title was called The Break, which is the title of a book he was publishing. This is a professional artist application, and he was requesting funds simply to publish the book using the editor. Steve, is there anything you want to say about your grant project before we move forward?
Well, thank you, Megan. It's good to be here. I wanted to just say that The Break was a book that I had been working on for a number of years before applying for the ADAP grant, and I applied for an individual artist grant and was turned down. And so I hired an editor, and that was the New York Book Doctor. And that was what led to then getting the ADAP grant and later getting it published.
Excellent. And so, Chaz had mentioned that you can hire professionals, and that's one of the services that the ADAP grant will pay for. So it's a great example of you might not typically think of a grant application. On the screen here, I didn't share what it was. It's a cover of Steve's book. It's called The Break. It's in kind of a lime green text, and it says Stephen Paul Lansky. There's a glass bottle on the cover with a kind of a wilting pink flower sticking out of the bottle. It says a memoir in cursive. And one of the things Steve likes to point out is that the stem of the flower is the same color of the text color, and it kind of intersects with the U in his name, which is like a really cool graphic that's part of that cover of his book. Anything else you wanted to add, Steve, to that?
Well, so the part of the funding from ADAP went to designing the cover, and the designer gave me contracted with the publisher, gave me 5 different covers to choose from. She read the book. Her name was Rachel Ake, and she's a professional cover designer in New York City. And she found this image from the text. There's a scene where the main character picks a flower from a flower box on the street when he's on a date with a woman, and then puts the flower in the bottle in the drink holder of the car and parks the car at a train station and takes a long trip by train. And when he comes back, the flower's wilted. And it's kind of a metaphor for the story and for the whole story, as well as an image from the book. I had no idea that would end up on the cover, but both the publisher and I really loved it when we saw it.
Very cool, Steve. Thank you. And Sarah's application, the project title was called Craft Fairs. It is an emerging artist application, and she requested funds to apply for and purchase display wares to sell her jewelry at craft fairs. On the image, we see a beautiful piece of jewelry, one of Sarah's pieces. It has a gold bead charm on like teal or bluish green glass beads with some kind of golden or yellow, like little flower beads that are kind of interspersed along the neckline. Sarah, do you want to add anything about your project scope before I get into the narrative questions? I think you're muted, unfortunately.
How about now?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, so this is my 3rd time that I applied for the grant. And previously I applied as a professional artist, but I didn't need a large amount of money for this project, so I decided to go with the emerging artist. And yeah.
And you were successful, so it was a good job.
Yes.
All right. So On the screen, it simply shows a picture of a book with kind of like little shooting stars coming out of it. There's an icon there and it says examples of effective grant narratives. Here's where we're going to walk you through the narrative questions posed in this year's grant application. I'm going to read or synthesize Steve and Sarah's responses for you. And then, as I mentioned before, Steve and Sarah will add comments on their process, their way of thinking, and why they responded to the questions the way they did. We think this is going to be really useful for you all. Question number 1, simply text on the screen here that I'm directly reading, says, provide a brief summary of activities for which you are requesting OAC funding. Sarah simply said, I'm requesting funding for the cost of applying to craft shows in the coming year. I plan on booking craft fairs during the grant period and beyond to sell my jewelry and other artwork. This is really important to me as an artist because I want to be an artist who is more visible in the community. This is also important to me because if I can sell, I can continue to buy more materials to keep on creating. Steve said, the money will go to the final cover design, editing, and layout of the book I will finish writing called The Break, a personal memoir. Find a description of the book below. And then the actual grant, Steve pasted a description of the book, but I did not put that on the slide here. The cover design requires a lot of work. The designer will include the book description, the reviews, and all the details that go on a book cover, including barcode, price, etc. I've already paid $600, but I owe $600 to complete the final design. For book editing, I've hired an editor, Pete, from the New York Book Doctor. So you can see these projects are very different. Both answers are very precise and describe simply what they will be using funding for. Steve even went into more detail about kind of line items that his budget will include. Steve and Sarah, do you have anything you would like to add to these? We can go with Steve first.
Part of the process of getting a book cover together is getting blurbs for the cover, which are brief reviews by other authors. And what I did was I searched my memory and database for other writers that I had met in educational programs in my travels and studies. And then Pete and I decided that the one we wanted the most was someone neither of us had any contact with or knew at all. But it was Kurt Vonnegut's son, Mark Vonnegut, who Kurt Vonnegut was a famous writer, and his son had schizophrenia and is now a pediatrician and wrote several books about his mental illness. And so we composed a letter together. Peter Olson is the editor, publisher of my book. We composed a letter together and cold called essentially Mark Vonnegut, and we did get the blurb. So that was pretty exciting. And I think having the grant may have affected that. I don't know.
I think so. You were really kind of thinking about that community outreach portion of the grant and also ways to promote it. So that makes perfect sense to me. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to comment on about the
scope? Last year, like in November, I started doing these craft fairs, and I really found that this is like the best path for me to go as an artist, especially having a disability, so I can communicate what I do and how I do to my customers.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. All right. Question number 2. Program quality. What area of your artistic career are you seeking to develop? Sarah and Steve answered this question in 2 parts because they were responding to a 2-part question from the old grant application. However, I think that the way that they have answered these and the way that their answers are broken down is really useful. So Sarah said, I want to undertake this project to sell my work, to be more involved in my community, and to establish myself more as an artist. This activity will advance my chosen art form by learning what kinds of pieces I make that customers like. Once I know, I can focus more on the technique involved in making those pieces. So she's kind of talking more of a meta view here, larger picture. And then she kind of talks a little more about the actual making and how she puts pieces together and the techniques that she's working on. Steve says, I think it's a story that is important to the public discourse on mental health. Again, meta, kind of a broader focus of his career, but then also he says it's an important part of my personal literary career and my personal growth to share my side of the story. Both focus on personal and professional artistic growth. 2 simple sentences to directly answer the question. Sarah, is there anything you would like to add to this?
No.
Okay, and Steve?
I've written poetry, plays, and experimental fiction, short stories, an audio novel, which is available on Spotify. And this was a very different project because it was a memoir. It was about my 43rd year. It was time bound. It described a specific experience around mental health. And as I did research on others who have written memoirs about mental health, I found that there's a uniqueness to my story.
I agree. Okay. We're going to move on to question number 3, community engagement. How do you share your work with your community? How will this project help reach new audiences? Sarah says she's going to market her artwork through her Facebook business page, create events for the shows, and post pictures of the work. She's also going to use her church's newsletter and bulletins to advertise the upcoming shows. She says she's also involved in her community with her artwork. She's part of the Medina County Art League. She's part of a statewide exhibition called Accessible Expressions Ohio. And she also does work with Valley Art Center Student Faculty Art Show. She's also donating a percentage of her sales to nonprofits in the community. So Sarah breaks the question down into 2 responses. She talks about leveraging social media, some online presence she also has, but then she also talks about some social and professional groups that she's part of and how she's going to market her artwork and in those circles. Sarah, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yes, I like to, express again about how the being physically in the community rather than online is better for me with my disability because I need a lot of help for doing online work.
Yeah. So there's going to be different resources that you're already engaged with that are going to be more useful to you as individuals. So you just need to think about what kind of leveraging you want to do and what makes the most sense for you in terms of promotion and reaching new communities. Steve says that part of the process of marketing has been getting blurbs from other writers, which he already spoke about, which I think is a really great idea. He also has a Facebook, Instagram pages, his own website, and the Arbitrary Press website, which I think is the publishing website that they were going to be able to obviously post the book on. And then his editor's website was also going to have a testimonial. He intended to send copies of the book out for reviews and share those reviews. And then he was going to research embedded reviewers and authors of memoir to think about who he really wanted those reviewers to be. A lot of personal and professional contacts that were going to submit blurbs to him, some journalists and other writers. He lists those in the grant, although I did not put them here to share with you all. That's kind of personal. And then he talked about how he's going to do public readings in person and on Zoom. He was lining that up at the time. He has connections at Miami University, where he taught for many years, some coffee shops and bookstores, and he was even hoping to get to New York City, where he had some professional contacts to push the book out. Stephen, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Well, one of my blurbists, journalist Arthur Allen, suggested reaching out to podcasts, and I listened to some podcasts on schizophrenia and found the podcast Inside Schizophrenia, and I wrote an email and sent the book, and we did an interview, and that's available on my website. I'll have a link to it, and also on wherever you find podcasts. And then also I did a Zoom, sorry about that, a Zoom reading, from Miami University that was also live, and that the video of that is available on my website. I did a reading at Motor Pub in downtown Cincinnati, a regular series, Word of Mouth is what it's called. It's a long-standing reading series. And I'm still trying to line up more events and things. The thing about writing a book and publishing a book these days is that it's not just what you do initially. The book is available on Amazon, it's available on other booksellers, and so it's going to be available in perpetuity. So the more people know about it, the better. It's very hard to get press reviews. One of the other strategies I've been using is Amazon reviews. But that's, again, that's difficult. So yeah.
I think that's great. I love that you found a podcast where you might insert yourself. I love that you found places where there's been readings going on. I've also heard of people, this wouldn't apply to you, but people have gone to open mics and, perform their song or some of their poetry as a way to do community outreach. And I kind of think of that, like that reading night that you mentioned, kind of lining up with that aspect. So you're already finding things happening in the community, and then you're just kind of inserting yourself or joining those community members who are presenting. I think lovely. Okay, where are we next? Okay, so beyond Sarah and Steve's examples, I wanted to talk about some unconventional ways to think about building community and marketing and finding new audiences. I think we often think that our projects have to culminate in something like a gallery showing or a theatrical production, having a release party. Those are all wonderful things that can happen to promote whatever you're creating. But there's lots of ways to share your work and reach new audiences using resources you may already have, kind of like Steve and Sarah just shared. So here are a few examples. This is simply what's listed on the slide. Upload your work to your social media accounts or Facebook groups. If you don't have a Facebook or social media account, consider making one just for your business or for your project, seeing if someone can help you do that if you don't know how to do that or you're unable to do that. Share your work via website, whether that's yours or a friend's website. Do what Steve is and reach out to websites that you think might be pertinent and relevant to the work you're doing and see if they can help promote. Present about your work at a mixer community gathering. I just talked about open mic nights. Steve talked about a reading series. Sarah does things with her art league. You could do that virtually or in person, depending on where the mixer is held. You could write about your project on a blog. You can ask your friends and your family or social networks to share your pages on their networks or push them out into the world. And then another great resource is simply posting the Ohio Artist Registry. I put the link there on the screen, but it's www.oac.ohio.gov/resources/Ohio Artist Registry. This is a website where you can create your own artist profile and share out the work that you're doing. So a great free resource that already exists. You can certainly reach out to us at Art Possible Ohio if you need help creating a profile on this screen, this website, and we'd be happy to support you in doing that. But I think that is a wonderful way to have an online presence. We recognize that a lot of you might live in a more rural part of the state, or you may not be able to leave your home when you want to, or you might even have trouble accessing adequate transportation. So we're just trying to provide some more creative and thoughtful examples of ways that you can promote your work from where you are, if that makes sense. Okay. Moving on. So now question number 4. Chaz talked about this one a little bit in depth. This is defining and measuring success. What are your goals for this project? How will this project help you advance your artistic career? I think it's great if you want to just simply break this question down into 2 answers. Question number 1, and number 2 answers question number 2. Chaz talked a little bit about starting about your project end date and working backwards. If you need some ways to think about how you can work through answering this question, but having those goals will also help you and support you in accomplishing and completing the grant as well. So Sarah's answer, I just absolutely love considering her craft fairs. She says she's already started her plan by pre-ordering the Northern Ohio Craft Fair booklet. She's got linked here in her answer. And once she gets that booklet, she's going to research which shows she thinks will be a good fit. She's going to pick shows that are in a 40-mile radius, and she's going to attempt to attend 3 shows per season throughout the calendar year. She's also going to take note of when the application opening dates are, put them in her calendar, set aside the cost of each show until the application is due. So she kind of quantified everything, either with dates over how many things she was going to do, how many tasks she had accomplished, and how much money she needed to spend. The beautiful answer to this question. In terms of advancing her artistic career. She talked a little bit about short-term goals and long-term goals, because that's how the question used to be posed, but I think it's a great way to answer this question still. This grant will help me advance my short-term goals as an artist by helping me sell my inventory and discover my audience. This grant will help me with my long-term goals as an artist by growing my skill set, being more involved in my community, and supporting those who are in need in my community. Sarah, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, for a lot of this, I took a lot of notes of, my research and piled it into an answer. So that's what my method like to do.
Yeah, it was an excellent answer. Steve. Well, Steve is just trying to publish his book. So his editor is giving him deadlines and he's going to meet those deadlines. And that's essentially what he wrote in his answer. I gave my deadlines to my reviewers. So he gave his reviewers for deadlines, which he wanted those in terms for marketing and outreach. And then his editors give him deadlines, which he put in there. He said he's going to try to meet them. He's done this before. He knows how to meet them. And then he also said Rome wasn't built in a day, which if you know Steve and you've talked to him, is just kind of his personality coming through in the grant answers. In terms of his goals, he talked about short-term again, another book on the shelf, another publication complete. We're going to complete this book. Long-term, he wants to add something significant to the body of literature around the subject of his book. He's done a lot of research. He knows there's a lot out there, but he thinks he has something really unique and important to add to that. It's kind of a synthesized answer of what he wrote. Steve, do you have anything you want to add on?
Well, just to say that in my educational studies, I've earned 2 master's degrees in writing, and part of writing a book, you do a literature review. So literature review involves reading everything you can find that's relevant to what you're writing so that you don't duplicate and do the same work someone else has already done. That was kind of a part of the process anyway, and the grant allowed me the time to do that. Also, the grant was used for the layout and the proofreading, and that was another part of long-term goal is to get better at proofreading. Also, I think I forgot to mention another interview I did that's also on the website with Clifton Market artist Tom Laurie. He's a local community person here in the neighborhood where I live, and he interviews people who come in and out of the local grocery store for his YouTube channel and his Facebook page. And so, there's this sense of becoming more part of the community and just kind of growing a presence as a writer in the community.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. So now we're going to talk a little bit about money, everyone's favorite subject. Simply the budget that you're going to produce for this grant and how you're going to communicate that with the grants committee. This question is called resource management. How will you use grant funding if it is awarded? I use Sarah's project as a kind of a template for this budget, but this is not actually Sarah's budget because it's none of your business what Sarah's actual budget was. So I created a fake budget for Sarah's project as a sample for you to think about how you might break down a project. So simply what they are asking for is your budget and your spending. All you have to do is break down your budget into line items, which simply means that you list the item and how much it's going to cost, or the service. If you're hiring for a service like Steve hired an editor, you're going to simply list the cost of those services. Then you're going to take all of those expenses, add them together, and that total is your budget. And it is okay if it exceeds the grant amount as long as you can explain how you will pay for additional costs. So on the screen here, I said simply break down the budget, create a line item list of your spending, list the amount for each item. And the sample breakdown I included includes several things you might need if you're putting together a package to go out and travel your craft wares, apply for craft shows, and sell your works. So I said you might need a new laptop computer so that you can research and post and market your events that you're going to attend. I gave a cost to that, $400. I found a cheap computer apparently. I said that you could use a cost for a website domain annual renewal. So say Sarah had a website she wanted to update, but the renewal was up. She was going to pop that number in there. It's $50 just to update that website under her name. Sarah's going to order some jewelry boxes, assorted sizes. It costs about $150. She needed a folding table to sell her crafts at. She needed a camp chair. She needs some jewelry stands, a promotional tablecloth with her logo, some business cards that she can pass out to folks, a rolling cart to haul her supplies, and then some entry fees. So I suggested 5 craft fair entry fees, an estimate of $75 per craft fair, equaling about $375. You add those all together, Sarah's grant would be for $1,380. Moving on, there's a second part to the resource management question. This is actually a wonderful tool that the OAC grant provides called the expense budget. It's a little link that will open into a form that you're going to fill out, simply a budget worksheet. And what you do here is you're going to go back to that line item budget you created, and you're going to categorize these expenses. On the grant application, the OAC provides definitions for each category, which makes it easier to determine which items go into what category. The categories are artist fees and honoraria, in-state travel, marketing publicity, production exhibition, space rental, conference or workshop fees, and accessibility. So once you take each expense and you pop it into these categories, you're going to enter that total under the first column under project program expenses. The second column up there, it says OAC grant distribution. The second row is asking how much of the grant funding will cover those expenses. So if you are using the entire grant to pay for your project, you will simply carry over the same amount of dollars to that second row. If you're paying out of pocket or using another funding source to cover some of your budget, you will simply subtract that amount from that first line and input that amount into the second line that the grant will be covering. It is simpler than it sounds. This is something that Art Possible IO can help you with. We can help you determine which expenses go into what category and where they go into these rows, make sure that it totals up correctly and that all expenses are accounted for. But I wanted to kind of go over it quickly, show you what it looks like so you won't be intimidated by it. The definitions for each category are really helpful. So if you're in the application, they're right there on the same page, and you should be able to self-determine which expenses go into which category based on that definition. Okay, and the final thing that I'm going to really talk about today in terms of what Sarah and Steve provided for their successful grants are some examples of support materials, because their support materials were very different as well. And I thought it would be useful to show how they can vary, but still be very effective. So the screen up here is a slide that says Sarah Bullington, PowerPoint with 12 images of her craft. It shows 2 pieces of jewelry that she created. One of these lovely acorn earrings that have silver hooks, and they're kind of on a black base. And then there is a dark green ceramic jug with a little cork and a crow on it that is on a glass and cork beaded chain. These are 2 pieces of jewelry that Sarah submitted as project examples. Sarah made this about as easy as possible in terms of showcasing 12 images of the work that she was producing. She simply created a PowerPoint presentation. She uploaded 12 different images to that PowerPoint, named the images, put what the jewelry and the crafts were made from, and then I uploaded the PowerPoint to her application. Sarah, do you want to comment on any of part of that process?
Yeah, well, for me, it's still a bit tricky because I don't have much photos to choose from, but, so I tried to get pieces that photographed that really represent what I'm going to be selling.
Yeah, and you did a great job, and the pieces you chose were lovely and perfect examples. Now, Steve, the next slide here, There's an image that says Steve Lansky, original illustrations, writing samples from his current work. On the screen, we have that book cover again that I described earlier, and then one of Steve's drawings that's actually from the book, which is kind of like a line drawing of a city scene. You kind of see a road in between several tall buildings, and there's some signs, some traffic, some people. We had to be a little more creative coming up with 12 examples, although Steve had plenty of things to choose from, but 12 examples to share and showcase Steve's project. So we uploaded things like the front of the book cover, the back of the book cover, which are two different designs. We uploaded several of Steve's drawings from his book. And then also sample writing materials from his book and other recent writing materials in order to have 12 total samples. Steve, do you have anything you want to comment on?
Well, just that I have this website which I keep regularly updated, and that has a lot of original content. And as long as it was more recent than 3 years, that content could be folded into the grant. This particular drawing on the right, there are 3 drawings in the book, sketches, that when one of my colleagues at Miami University, Mary Jean Corbett, read the book, she suggested dividing it into 3 sections. And when I broke it into 3 sections, I thought it would be appropriate to put a sketch at the beginning of each section. So this is the first one. It's a sketch of Ludlow Avenue in Clifton from the corner of Clifton Avenue, and then the one of Bryant Avenue that Chaz showed earlier is the view from the front porch of where I used to live. So that was the last one for part 3, and then there's another one. So yeah, I can go on.
Yeah, well, you should. You're a natural marketer of your book. I think that's fine. And I'm sorry, Steve, your drawing that I included is a little bit squished. I had to squish it slightly just to make it fit out.
Both of these images are a little bit squished, yeah.
But I wanted to show them. So that concludes my sharing of Steve and Sarah's direct examples from the grant application. But as mentioned before, Art Possible Ohio has a role in this grant where we can provide technical support for you in lots of different ways to apply for this grant. And I worked with Sarah and Steve in very different ways. With Sarah, simply having known Sarah a few years, she would just email me and she said, Megan, I put everything into my grant application. Can you please go in and check and make sure that everything is there? I logged into her account, checked everything. I think we were missing like 1 image, uploaded that image, and Sarah was good to go. With Steve, it was a much longer process. We had a conversation about the project. I emailed him the grant questions. We had a phone call where I inputted the grant questions. He sent me materials. I uploaded them. It was a lovely experience, but just a little more involved. So there's lots of different ways that we can work with you. I listed on the screen here a few very specific ways, but give me a call anytime or email us. We'll include my contact information on the end, and we can talk through different ways that us at Art Possible Ohio can help you and get you where you need to be in terms of submitting a successful grant application. One of the first things we can do is just have a phone call or a Zoom and talk through your idea, your grant proposals or ideas to see if we think it's a good fit. We can certainly review the grant guidelines with you, talk through those on the phone and all the materials that you might need. We're more than happy to send you a Word doc version of the grant or email you grant questions, type out the guidelines for you if that's what you need, or we can even send you paper copies as well to your home address. Simply in terms of inputting grants answers, in terms of those narrative questions we talked about today, we can schedule a Zoom call or a phone call. You can tell me what the answers are over the phone and I can type them right into your grant application for you. We can collect and support materials for your grant application, like your resume, your bio, any images you might send. We can format those for you and we can upload them to your grant application, upload them to your grant application online. If you don't have a CV or resume, we can help you create one. If you have a LinkedIn page, we can pull information from that or a website and make it work to create a successful and professional looking resume for you to upload. And then finally, we can review all the grant draft and the narrative. We can make sure there are no errors or any missing materials to make sure that you're ready to hit that submit button. So those are lots of different ways that we can support your grant application. There's probably some things I'm even missing on there. So just give me a call or shoot me an email and we'll talk through what we can do. And then I think that's the end of our portion. And Chaz is now going to talk about ways OAC can support you in terms of this process.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Megan, Steve, and Sarah for such a wonderful and informative workshop there. I do want to show you all, our audience, how we, the OAC staff, can offer assistance to you as well. We can do all the things that Megan mentioned, but here are some other ways we can help. You can utilize the request feedback function in the RD application, but you will need to do that no later than 2 weeks before the deadline. That will send a notification to the program coordinator, me, to take a look at your in-progress application. We will review it and then email you back with any comments. But please give us at least 2 to 3 days to complete that. Again, that button will disappear within 2 weeks of the deadline. So make sure you use it by April 14th if you can, okay? We can mail you a paper copy of the application, as Megan mentioned. You can complete it and then mail it back. But we will kind of have to get creative at how you'll supply those audio visual samples with us too. Our investment team will keep you up to date with the deadline reminder. If you have an application in progress in RD, you'll get that notification. We'll keep you informed about panel meetings, contact you if you have any missing or incomplete information in your application. They can also help you with any questions you may have regarding the grant agreements or payment processing. We can send you a summary of the panel comments that were made about your application after the panel meeting takes place. Again, we, Kathy and I, and along with the investment team at the Ohio Arts Council, can help you get your funds once you are awarded and getting set up in the Ohio pays and system and all that. So this is how you can reach us. Again, my name is Chaz O'Neill. My picture is on the right, and my phone number is 614-728-4421. My email is chaz.oneil@oac.ohio.gov. And our website is www.oac.ohio.gov. And Megan, you want to read your information?
I can do that. Megan Feitz, my name. You can reach out to us at 380-799-MAKE, which is also 799-6253. And then my email is megan@artpossibleohio.org. If somehow you would lose this information, OAC would be happy to share my contact information with you and shoot back to me as well. But we'll be happy to work with you and happy to hear from you.
Great. So that is all for us today. From Kathy, Katie, Megan, and all the and Arts Possible, we want to thank our special guests, Sarah and Stephen, for sharing their process today. And we want to thank the audience for tuning in as well. I know Katie and Kathy have been working behind the scenes and answering questions in the Q&A forum, but we do have a little time here to answer any questions on air if we have any. So Katie.
Thanks, Chaz. So we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. We're coming up on time here.
Okay.
Someone asked if someone was practicing their art years ago and has recently started again in the past few years, which category should they apply in?
Well, have a conversation with us. Let's see where they're at in that process. Depending on what kind of project they want to undertake, and we can kind of have that conversation more thoroughly if you want to apply an emerging artist or a professional artist. Yeah, pretty easy, but it'll just take a phone call.
Thanks, Chaz. One more question here. So this is a specific question about the support materials. So if you're planning on publication of a book, but you don't draw your own illustrations, do you submit your illustrator's work in the samples, or how would you go about how would you recommend doing that?
Well, would Stephen want to answer that? Do you think he has some experience in this?
I would guess you would just have your illustrator send samples. Yeah. Maybe have several different illustrators.
Yeah, we submitted Steve's cover, which was designed by someone who designs covers and illustrates.
I don't think I sent the other covers, but Rachel Ake gave 5 different covers, which Pete and I chose one from. So yeah, send the work of the professional that you've engaged. Thank you, Chaz.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Great, fantastic. I think that does it for today. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to tune in. Hopefully we answered all your questions that you have. Of course, if we didn't, or you come up with more questions in the process, as Megan said, Art Possible and then Chaz, our staff here at the OAC, are always available. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who tuned in today and everyone who registered today with Megan and Chaz's contact information, along with a copy of the slide deck and a link to the recording. So you can expect to receive that probably early next week. We'll try and get that turned around pretty quickly. And I just wanted to thank again Chaz and Megan and Sarah and Stephen. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. It was great hearing from you all. And I think that does it for today. So thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.